rain, fine and cold, started falling the moment we arrived at Whisper Lake in the Blackwood Preserve. I, Ellie Green, 19 years old and an environmental science student, was there with 3 college classmates, Lewis, Gina, and Sam, for a 2-week research project. The lake was hidden in a forested hollow, far from any paved road, accessible only by a muddy trail you could barely navigate with a jeep. Google Maps lost signal halfway, as if the forest didn't want to be found. Yet, there was a heavy, almost seductive silence in the air, like the lake was coaxing us to stay. The first day was normal. We took water samples, tested the soil along the shore, and set up our tents on a pebbled beach. But on the second night, something shifted. It was past 2 a.m., and I was sleeping outside my tent under a waterproof tarp. A faint dripping sound came from the lake, like a faucet left slightly open. I got up and walked closer to the water. The surface was mirror smooth, without a ripple or bubble. No fish, no birds, nothing. Just that steady drip, as if it came from deep below. I crawled back into my sleeping bag, but all night I felt something watching me from beneath the lake. In the morning, I opened my field notebook to log observations. A page I'd left blank the night before was now filled with a single, repeated sentence, scrawled in pencil with a shaky hand. Something's breathing under the water. My heart sank. Lewis, Gina, and Sam were by the fire and swore they hadn't written anything. The pencil was still in my pocket. Sam, always the joker, said, "Maybe you wrote it in your sleep, Ellie." But his eyes betrayed doubt. On the third day, Lewis shared something odd. The previous night, he'd felt someone breathing next to him in his sleeping bag, a cold, damp breath right by his ear. When he flicked on his flashlight, no one was there. The 3 of us were asleep in the other tent, and his tent's zipper was locked from inside. Gina, who's a bit superstitious, said, "This place feels wrong, like something in the water's watching us." I tried to be rational, suggesting it was the wind, but deep down, a vague fear was growing. That night, we decided to set up an audio recorder by the lake. A simple device, fully charged, on a tripod near the water. When we played the file the next morning, my skin crawled. The dripping was there, but mixed with something else. A deep, gurgling respiration like someone breathing underwater. Between the breaths was a rhythmic, nauseating sound, like the reverse tick of a broken pump or something with sharp teeth chewing on soft flesh. None of us spoke. Sam just muttered, This isn't an animal." By the 5th day, the rain was heavier, and the lake seemed alive. Its usually clear water now had a strange murkiness, as if something had stirred the sediment from the bottom. Gina said that while taking samples, she felt something touch her finger underwater. Not a fish, not a plant, but something cold and slimy that seemed to pulse. When I suggested she might have imagined it, she snapped, "Ellie, I felt it. It was like fingers." Lewis proposed packing up and leaving, but Sam argued, "We've barely collected half our data. If we bail now, our project's screwed." I agreed to stay, but I regret it now. On the 6th night, none of us could sleep. We placed the recorder in the middle of camp, and we all sat around it, staring at the lake. Past 3 a.m., a faint light appeared in the center of the lake, like a sunken lantern, glowing beneath the surface, maybe 10 meters down. It drifted slowly toward the shore, its cold, teal glow like the eye of a giant creature. Gina grabbed my hand and whispered, "What is that, Ellie?" Before I could answer, the light blinked once and vanished. No ripples, no sound. But for a split second, I swear I saw a shadow move underwater, a long, contorted shape with lines that looked like too many fingers. In the morning, when we checked the recorder, it was off. The battery was full, but it was as if someone had hit the stop button. Sam tried playing the earlier files, but they were corrupted with static, a grating noise like thousands of tiny teeth scraping inside a glass jar. Lewis said, "This place isn't safe anymore." That day we packed up camp and left. On the drive back, no one spoke. Gina only whispered once. I think that light saw us. When we gave the recordings to our professor, he said, either your device was faulty or the files were tampered with. But we knew what we heard. A week later, Sam called me, saying he dreamt of a slimy, faceless thing crawling out of the lake and standing by his bed, just breathing. A few months later, Gina told me that whenever it rains, she feels a shadow outside her window, a wet silhouette that seems to drip through the glass. Lewis never talks about Whisper Lake anymore, but I once saw a pebble from the lake shore in his bag, etched with a strange symbol, a circle with lines like elongated fingers. As for me, I still hear the dripping in my dreams. Sometimes I wake up in the middle of the night, convinced my sleeping bag is soaked, but when I check, it's dry. Worst of all, one time in the bathroom mirror, I glimpsed a shadow behind me, a tall, thin thing without a face, as if made of water. I blinked, and it was gone, but I still feel like Whisper Lake hasn't let us go. Whatever was breathing under the water is still out there, looking for us. The rain had been pouring over the Lost Arrow Preserve in Colorado since last night, as if the forest was hiding under a gray curtain. I, Claire, 25 years old and a guide for teen wilderness tours, was in charge of a group of 10, 15, and 16-year-olds who'd come for a week of hiking. On the third morning, when we woke up, two of the girls, Lena and Brooke, had vanished after breakfast. At first, I thought they'd gone to explore around the camp, since Lena was always curious and Brooke usually tagged along. But by 11 o'clock, there was still no sign of them. The kids were getting worried, and a bad feeling settled in my gut. Around noon, an old ranger named Jake showed up at camp. He was a wiry guy with a sun-beaten face and eyes that seemed to hide something. I told him the girls were missing. He frowned and said, I hope they didn't head toward Path 77. I asked what Path 77 was. He pulled out a tattered map and pointed to a faint line that stretched from the camp into the deep forest. It's an old trail, he said. They closed it years ago because some hikers went missing there and were never found. They even erased its name from new maps. When I asked why, he just said, that part of the forest, it's different. His gaze was cold, like he was swallowing a secret. There was no choice. I grabbed a backpack with a flashlight, rope, and a pocket knife and told the kids to stay at camp. One of the boys, Caden, said, I'm coming with you. He was a bit stubborn, but his eyes were full of worry. I said, fine, but listen to me. We set off toward Path 77. The rain soaked our faces and fog blanketed the forest floor, like the ground was steaming. The trail started with a rusted sign that read, No entry. Underneath, someone had scrawled in red paint, Don't come back. The deeper we went, the heavier the air felt. It was like the forest was breathing, but there were no birds, no rustling leaves underfoot. Even the sound of our steps was muffled, as if the ground swallowed noise. Caden whispered, Why is it like this here? I didn't answer, but I felt something watching us from the shadows of the trees. A quarter of an hour later, I saw a red piece of fabric tied to a pine branch, Lena's scarf. My heart pounded. I told Caden, stay close. A little farther, we found a tree trunk with words carved into it by a knife. We're still walking, but we're not in this forest. The handwriting was sloppy, like it was done in a rush. Caden froze. Who wrote this? Lena and Brooke. I said, I don't know, but we have to find them. Deep down, a cold fear was taking root. The rain got heavier, and the fog was so thick we could barely see a few feet ahead. I heard a faint sound, a kind of murmur, like kids whispering in their sleep. Caden said, Did you hear that? I nodded and said, Stay quiet. Suddenly, a shadow moved in the fog, a vague shape, neither human nor animal. It was lanky, with arms that seemed too long, dragging on the ground. Its face, God, it had no face, just a smooth, flat surface, like a clay mask that hadn't dried. The murmur grew louder, and now it seemed to form words. Claire, Caden come. How did it know our names? Caden pulled out his phone and turned on the camera flash, aiming the light straight at the shadow. The flash blinked a few times, and the shadow seemed to shrink for a moment. I screamed with all my might. Lena, Brooke, where are you? Get away from us. Caden held the phone up and started shouting. Get lost. Get lost. The flash's light scattered in the fog, and the shadow took a step back, but the murmur echoed in my head. They belonged to us now. We ran, but the trail seemed to have changed. The trees had shifted, and the no entry sign was gone. The murmur was everywhere now, like it was coming from the ground and the air. Caden was panting. This forest is messing with us. For a moment, something cold grabbed my hand. I turned. Nothing was there, but I saw muddy fingerprints on my wrist. A soft laugh, like a child's voice from far away, echoed in the fog. I told Caden, whatever happens, don't stop. After hours of wandering, we finally saw the camp. The tents were soaked under the rain, and the kids were huddled around the fire. Lena and Brooke were there, in their tent, safe and calm. Their clothes were clean, like they'd never been in the forest. There wasn't even mud on their shoes. My breath caught. I said, where were you? Lena looked at me, her eyes somehow empty. In a quiet voice, she said, we thought we were following you. Brooke nodded but said nothing. Caden looked at me and whispered, Those aren't them, are they? That night, as I passed by their tent, I heard whispering, soft and rhythmic, like a lullaby. I pulled back the tent flap. Lena and Brooke were sitting on their sleeping bags, staring at the wall, speaking in a strange language. No one else was in the tent. The hairs on my neck stood up. I said, who are you talking to? Lena tilted her head and gave a weird smile. The ones in the forest. In the morning, I called Jake to come to the camp. When he arrived and saw Lena and Brooke, his face went pale. He said, they shouldn't be here. Path 77 doesn't take people. It changes them. He said years ago, something lived in that trail, a faceless thing that tricks people and takes their place. He told us to pack up the camp and never come back. We loaded the kids onto the minibus and headed back to town. Lena and Brooke were silent the whole way, just staring out the window. Now, whenever it rains, I hear their whispers in my ears, and every once in a while, I find a piece of red fabric in my backpack, like Lena's scarf, but always wet. Worst of all, sometimes in the mirror, I see muddy fingerprints on my neck, and I feel like a faceless shadow is still following me. The rain was coming down like a gray curtain, drowning the forests of Wales. The four of us, me, Jack, Ellen, and Sophia, were huddled under a wooden tarp at our campsite, surrounded by fog so thick it felt like the world had vanished. The hills around us, called the Lost Hills by the locals, loomed in the mist, their shapes twisting like something alive. Jack was carving a stick with his knife, grumbling. Who'd have thought summer would turn into a dam flood? Ellen, always itching for adventure, smirked. It's a bit of a thrill, right? Tomorrow we'll hike to the top. Sophia, who'd been against this trip from the start, just stared into the fire, muttering, something's off about this place. The day before, an old woman in the village below had warned us, don't go up when it rains. The hills wake up. Jack had laughed, calling her a nutcase, but I'd caught a flicker of fear in her eyes, like she'd seen something she couldn't unsee. Now, under the tarp, I felt watched, not by eyes, but by something pressing against my chest, like a shadow breathing too close. The rain hammered harder, and a strange sound drifted from the hills, a low hum, like an ancient song rising from the earth. Sophia's head snapped up. You hear that? Jack shrugged. Just the wind. But I heard it too. A rhythm, like someone chanting under their breath, the words too muddled to catch. Ellen said, Could be a cave. Want to check it out? Sophia glared. At night? In this storm? You're insane. But Ellen flashed a mischievous grin. What scared? Jack chuckled and stood up. I don't know why, but I felt this pull like something was calling me to go. We grabbed our flashlights and backpacks and trudged into the storm. The rain stung our faces, and the fog was so dense we could barely see a few steps ahead. The hum grew louder, now laced with whispers, like a chorus sharing a secret. We reached a circle of stones in the middle of the hill, half buried, as if they'd clawed their way out of the dirt. The stones were round, etched with strange carvings that gleamed in the wet. At the center was a shallow pit filled with rainwater, but the water, it rippled without wind, alive. Jack crouched down. What is this? Some old Celtic magic. Sophia snapped. Don't touch it, idiot. But Ellen picked up a small rock and tossed it into the pit. The water swirled, and the hum stopped dead. The silence was so heavy it choked me. Then a smell hit us. Not mud or rain, but a sharp, sour stench, like sulfur and burnt hair. Sophia stepped back. We shouldn't be here. A shadow slunk out of the fog. A towering, grotesque wraith, nearly 7 feet tall, its body a writhing mass of black mist that pulsed like a heartbeat. Its arms were too long, curling like tendrils, and its eyes, 2 crimson gashes, burned through us, as if they could see our bones. Its voice slithered into our heads without moving. Why have you come? Ellen screamed and hurled a stick at it. The stick passed through the wraith and hit the ground. Jack yelled, "What the hell is that?" and chucked a rock, but the shadow just rippled and drifted closer. Sophia fumbled in her backpack, pulled out a water bottle, and splashed at the thing, thinking maybe old stories held some truth. The wraith laughed, a deep, fractured sound that felt like it came from the earth itself. You belong to me. We ran, but the fog seemed to trap us. No matter which way we turned, we ended up back at the stone circle. The wraith was closer now, its voice burrowing into our skulls, making my thoughts feel like they were unraveling. Ellen shouted, "We gotta wreck the pit." Jack and Sophia started grabbing stones from the circle and hurling them into the water. I found a heavy branch and smashed it against the carved stones. Each hit seemed to enrage the wraith. Its voice grew louder, a howling storm in our heads. Suddenly, the pit began to tremble. The water bubbled, and a surge of black mist erupted from it. The wraith roared and dissolved into the fog, but its voice lingered. "I'll return." The stone circle collapsed, and the pit filled with mud. The 4 of us, soaked and shaking, bolted back to camp. We stayed under the tarp until dawn, too scared to move. Locals found us in the morning. They said the stone circle was tied to a vile entity, something ancient that stirs in the rain. They told us never to come back. The 4 of us haven't talked about that night since, but every time it rains, we all smell that sour, sulfurous stench. And sometimes we find a carved stone in our pockets, proof that thing is still watching. Heard a sound in the woods that wasn't right? Seen something by the campfire that still haunts you? Whisper Lake knows your fear. Share your creepiest camping story in the comments below. What made you run? The lake's listening. Dare to tell.